And welcome back, students, as we get into our next topic, which is that of loops. So today we're going to start off by examining two different types of loops, the while and the do while. So getting started, up to this point, if we want to do repetitive tasks in Java, such as outputting, let's say, 10 lines of code, we had to write the code multiple times. However, we can use something called loops. Loops allow programmers to do repeatable tasks in steps known as iterations. There are three types of loops in Java. You have while, do while, and for. And as I mentioned, we're going to look at those first two today. So with a while and a do while. In a while loop, the Boolean expression is checked before the loop body is executed. If the expression is false, the code will fall out of the loop and isn't executed. In a do while loop, the code is executed once, and then the Boolean expression is checked afterwards. So it just really comes down to, do you want to run the code at least once, or do you want to run the code, maybe potentially 0 times, depending on whether or not that Boolean condition is met. So here's some sample code that helps us look at these. So the first one here is a while loop. So we have just an int called countdown. First while loop is set to 3, while countdown is greater than 0. So now print line hello. Countdown is minus minus. So it's going to decrement this by 1 each time. Here we have a do while loop. And of course we have countdown set to 3 again. And of course, this is now print line hello, countdown minus minus, while countdown is greater than 0. So if we look at these two loops, you can see that the outputs are pretty much the same. All right, it's hello, 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 then hello, hello, hello. The only difference between these two loops really is where it's doing the Boolean check. So here it does the Boolean check first. Here it does the Boolean check last. All right, so that's the kind of the key thing to know, is that they are interchangeable in what you can kind of do. I personally prefer using just regular while loops because I can change the conditions if I need to, if I want to guarantee at least one loop. So anything that is written with a while loop in Java can also be written with a do while loop and vice versa. As you've noticed, the outputs to those two those two loops were the same. They both said, hello 3 times. So let's talk about, though, if you want to take a while and you want to put it to a do while. So a while is simply just while, some Boolean condition, and then inside the curly brackets, you're going to put some statements. All right, now with a do while, you're going to have some kind of Boolean condition, your do, some statements there, and then the while. All right, so big thing to kind of remember here between these two programs. You'll note that here we've added an if statement. All right. In this case, the reason why we have an if here is because if the Boolean is false, then we never enter this do while. Because here, remember, the do will print out this code at least once. If I want to mimic exactly the same thing as this while loop, I just put this if right here. Now, on the other hand, if I want to go from do while to while, I'm going to say do, and I'm going to do some statements, and while, and the Boolean condition. With the while loop, I just have to put those statements first, then do the while loop, and then the statements. All right, so just a matter of placement of how you want your code to be. Again, I prefer just using a while loop and adjusting my code as necessary. Now here's another demo for us to look at. We have an averager demo. So in here, we are getting a list of non-negative scores. At the end of the list, we'll show with a negative number. So in other words, we're going to use like -1, for example, say, hey, no more numbers in here. Then you're going to compute the average. So we have a double next, and sum is 0, and count is 0. Next is equal to keyword.next double. And while next is greater than or equal to 0, we're going to take sum and add to it the value of next, because it's just an adding up of all the numbers within the average. Count plus plus, because we want to keep track of how many numbers we've added. And then, of course, get the next number. Now, if at any point count is equal to 0, we just want to say no scores entered. Otherwise, we're going to say double of average is equal to sum divided by count. And system out of the print line, count plus score read, the average is average. So this just says, hey, I read in this many numbers, and the average is going to be this. Pretty simple program. So if we look at that, the end of the list, we show them a negative integer, I'll compute their average. I type in 4, 5, 6, 1, and then I put in -5. It could be any negative number. Well, that's a negative. Must be in the list. So we read in 4 numbers. Notice that the -5 is not counted It only is the positive numbers that were counted. So we read in 4, so 4 scores are read, and then the average here in this case happens to be 4.0, because remember, it is a double. All right, sentinel values. Now we've kind of already alluded to what sentinel values are when we looked at this loop, and we said, hey, we want this to stop when it's like -1 or -5 or any negative number. In this program, we saw that we ended that average search using a negative number. While a sentinel value isn't always negative, it could be that way. Maybe we're adding negative numbers and we wanted to stop when we put in a positive number. It does need to be a value that would not be considered a quote-unquote real input. So, for example, let's say you're getting side length of a shape, whether it's square, triangle, whatever, and you want just the length of the side. Well, you know that if the length is, pretty much 0 or smaller, well, it's non-existent. So you can't use those. Those would be considered unreal. You could also use an odd number, for example, to act as a sentinel. Maybe you were getting a list of even numbers. Well, an odd is not even. So that's just another example of different things you can do with them. Now, the Boolean expression in our code, next is greater than or equal to 0, allows us to end the loop properly by testing the Boolean before adding, the number read. This prevents the sentinel value from being added to our sum for the average. And we saw that because we only took in 4 inputs, the -5 was not added in. And that's going to wrap up this lesson, folks. So, until next time.